We are now pleased to introduce today's trainer. Amber Freeman comes to CCEH with over 15 years of experience in the human service and behavioral health field, with the last 8 years being in management positions. At CCEH, Amber is the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator, and because of her expertise, she also leads the Rapid Rehousing Learning Collaborative and assists with the coordination and compliance of other projects and initiatives. Over the years, Amber has worked in various capacities with individuals and families in diverse settings. Amber has experience working with and managing programs for individuals with mental health, substance abuse, and co-occurring diagnoses, as well as individuals experiencing homelessness and those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Most recently, Amber was a program manager, where she managed community support case management programs and permanent supportive housing programs. Amber is a 2-time graduate of Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, where she received her bachelor's in psychology education and her master's in community agency counseling. We are now pleased to turn it over to our trainer today, Amber Freeman.
We have 5 main parts of CCEH. The first is data and analysis. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the HMIS system in Connecticut. CCEH actually manages that system. So we are always looking at the data. We are the owners of that system. So with any individual that is experiencing homelessness, they are entered into the HMIS system. Within that system, we're also pulling out the data to see how programs are operating, what outcomes are, seeing, are there any issues that maybe we need to look into. I believe we're very data driven. I believe that the data tells a lot about what it is that we should focus on. We also have training in TA. That is my department. So I work with providers to help them build capacity, share, learn, and implement best practices. For advocacy, we're always educating elected officials, the public, different partners on the problems and that we are seeing, as well as solutions and different resources that we need to end homelessness. For community impact, we are working with strengthen our local collaboration, creating and supporting adherence to policies and procedures, providing staff support in the different communities, and ensuring quality. And then lastly, we have our emergency assistance department, which we use to raise funds to help to fill the gaps in emergency resources for frontline workers so that they can support staff. So they can support clients. And I'll be going into that a little bit more in my presentation. Okay, so although we're going to be talking about the Connecticut homeless response system, I think it's really important to just talk about homelessness in general so you all can have a sense of it. So oftentimes we have a question where people are wanting to know, how many people experience homelessness in America? And that's kind of a difficult question to answer because there's so many different factors, right? You don't know who is going to be homeless on any given night. We do have something that is called our annual point in time. And that is one night that each state has, and they go around, different providers as well as volunteers, they go around in the community and they try to count as many unsheltered homeless individuals as possible. So literally going down the streets, going in abandoned buildings, looking in cars, going to encampments to see who's out there, right? Who's out there that is not within the shelter system. So if doing that, of course, you're going to miss some people. You're not able to count everyone, right? But we do try. So these numbers are based off of the 2019 point in time count. So based off of 2019 and 2020, we don't really have that information because nothing was normal in 2020. But based off of 2019, on a given night, there was about 567,715 individuals that were homeless in America. That's a large number. And that number breaks down to about 356,422 sheltered people. So those that you can actually count within the shelter system, but then also 293 of those that are unsheltered. So those are the people that I said, that may be in abandoned buildings or a car. right? So that's just a sense of how homelessness is in America. And then when I say homelessness, there's two different types of homelessness. So we have literal homelessness, which is people that are sleeping on the street or in a place not meant for human habitation. That's literal homelessness. They are literally homeless at this moment. They have no other options. They are homeless. And then you also have imminent homelessness. So this refers to those that are at risk of losing their housing within a short period of time. So they may be facing eviction. They may be staying with family or friends temporarily, and they may want them to leave soon, or they may be couch surfing. A lot of times you'll hear people that will say that they are homeless because they don't necessarily have a place of their own, but they're staying with a friend. So for HUD definition's sake, that is not considered homeless. So they are not included in these numbers, right? Because they still have a roof over their head. They're staying with friends and family. They're couch surfing, but they don't fall in one of these categories. All right. So when you're talking about homelessness, we have to talk about the significant racial disparities in homelessness. So just know that most minority groups make up a larger share of the homeless population than they do of the general population. I'm going to let y'all sit with that for a second, right? Because it kind of takes you back for a second. So most minority groups make up a larger share of the homeless population than they do of the general population. You can see from the graph here that Black and BIPOC group takes up the majority of those that are homeless, right? But then you look at the general population and it's a smaller group. So what are some reasons? Why do you all think that may be?
I'm just thinking from a general standpoint. I don't think it's pretty hard to see that there's a lot of like institutional racism and things happening there. We also know like race and class level typically go hand in hand in terms of where people sit on this level. So in terms of like accessibility and stuff, I think it's probably harder based on discrimination or just anything, I guess, to people to access things, or especially people of color to access things or get access to things because of these barriers.
Exactly. Basically, exactly what you said, but there has been a long standing of historical and structural racism. As you said, poverty, incarceration, individuals of color are more likely to be incarcerated. Affordable housing, having housing discrimination, landlords that are not willing to rent to individuals of color, having access to quality health care, having to decide if you're going to pay for your healthcare versus pay for your rent, right? And that may leave some out with not having a option for housing. So, as I said, the size is larger for those that are individuals of color experiencing homelessness versus the general population. But just to give a little bit of context to that, so it is for African Americans particularly, it's about 13% of the general population. However, we take up about 39% of people experiencing homelessness. And when you're talking about families that are experiencing homelessness, African Americans are 50% of families are African American that experience homelessness. So keep that in mind as we're going through this presentation. All right, so over the years, there's been many different solutions to homelessness. Everyone has a different set of needs, but there's been different strategies to how we can end homelessness, right? So there has been emergency shelter, soup kitchen, drop-in centers that provide safe places for individuals to sleep, basic needs, counseling, case management, where they can help them with obtaining housing, healthcare, and services. And then we also have homeless outreach, which are different teams of individuals who identify and engage people who are unsheltered and try to connect them to services. So you have teams that are literally going into encampments, they're going to abandoned buildings, they're trying to see who's out there on the street that's experiencing homelessness that is not, willing to come into the system. Right. And then you have supportive housing as a solution to homelessness. So these are the programs that combine subsidized housing with wraparound case management services. With that, as a form of supportive housing, we have rapid rehousing, which is the subsidy and the housing. You get case management as well, but it also emphasizes housing search and navigation. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we have rental assistance and affordable housing. Let's make housing more affordable for people. That should help with limiting homelessness, right? We also have medical respite, which is medically supervised places for people experiencing homelessness that are discharged from the hospital. So a lot of times people that are experiencing homelessness, they go to the hospital. It's open all the time, right? The emergency rooms are always open. It's warm. So they'll often go to the hospital. But then you also do have those that are experiencing real medical emergencies and they don't have anywhere to go when they get out. No one wants to discharge anyone to homelessness. So that's where medical respite comes in. And then you have reentry services, which are programs that help people transition from prisons and jails to the community. CCH, we actually have a reentry service that we have throughout the state, which has been a great program. So a little history, there's been several different responses to homelessness over the years. So in 1980s, it was more of a crisis response where, they started seeing that there's so much homelessness, what can we do, right? So the immediate response was to have emergency shelters. Let's provide soup kitchens so people can have a place to eat, some drop-in centers, and homeless outreach to see who's out there. Did that for a while. And then in the 1990s, the focus started to become more on treatment to see, okay, so, we're providing shelters, we're providing food, but let's provide some treatment, right? So that we can really help with the underlying causes. Let's provide some treatment in regards to helping an individual with their mental health or with their addiction. Did that for a while. In the late 1990s to the 2000s, the approach became supportive housing and housing first philosophy. So basically, it's helping people obtain housing first and then providing services to help them address other needs. So removing those barriers. We're going to provide the housing first, and then we can work on the services instead of being very treatment focused from the beginning. So the focus initially was on individual programs. So there became a lot of individual programs just everywhere, just tons of programs that focused on housing first, right? So in 2010s to present, where we currently are, our focus is on housing first, a systems approach versus a programs approach. So with the systems approach, it's different. It's having a complete system, right? Instead of just different programs. It's focusing on our system in its entirety. And then with doing so, we have a greater range of supportive housing, rapid housing, shelter diversion, and problem solving, because we're all working together. And that's what we're going to go into next. But for our current approach, which is our systems approach, we believe that everyone is housable. It's based off of housing first, but we believe that everyone is housable. Research has shown that with the right level of support, everyone can achieve housing stability and be successful. They can be a successful tenant regardless of their service needs, like if they have a mental illness or a substance abuse. Doesn't matter. Everyone can be housed. right? And then we also believe that intervention should be tailored. Everyone has a different set of needs. Everyone's different. Everyone comes from a different background. So how we deliver services should be tailored for that person, right? Some people may need short-term, some people may need long-term assistance. So it's based off of each individual. And then lastly, we believe that ending homelessness requires working at a systems level. So in order to obtain our goal of having homelessness being rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, we believe that we have to create a system where people are able to be identified and provided with tailored services to connect them to permanent housing. So overall system, not just the programs. So we have that system approach. And when we started that systems approach, you can see from the data here that over time, we were able to bring homelessness down within Connecticut. So on January 21st, 2020, that point in time count was done, and there is about 2,904 people experiencing homelessness within Connecticut, right? So that is about a 4% decrease since 2019 and a 35% decrease since 2007. So having a systems approach actually does work. So annually, we also saw that the use of emergency shelters and transitional housing declined by 50% since 2012 because we have a response system in place now. So here's our response system throughout Connecticut. I'm not certain if you all have seen this before, but this is what we utilize, right? So just how this works, this is just a flow chart. How this works is someone or a family can come into our system in either two ways. Someone can either call 211. 211 is the entry point for all. So someone can either call 211. I'm sure you all are familiar with it. They can say what's going on with them, what their needs are. If their need is for housing, they are connected to a CAN assessment, right? So they have a CAN assessment. At that CAN assessment, they are, figuring out what their needs are, listening to them, figuring out what their needs are, seeing how vulnerable they are, getting all the information as possible to see how we can assist them. So at that CAN assessment, they are either prioritized for a shelter and then, or they're actually entered into a shelter if there is space available. So at the shelter, this is when they're still receiving case management. Case management is being done, and at every single point, we're trying to divert someone. We're trying to divert them because we don't want people to actually be within our system, right? Of course, we have that system there for when someone is in crisis, but we don't just automatically say, okay, let's just bring someone in the system. We want to try to divert them as much as possible. So having those problem-solving conversations, see if there's any other family or any other housing options that they can have, seeing if there's a means to do rapid exit, which I will talk about, or seeing if they can self-resolve and, with the support of their case manager, if they can figure out their problem and have a solution so that they don't actually come into the system. But if someone does actually come into the system, they're put on the by name list. Now, our by name list is a list that holds all individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And that list is used for when we have housing solution meetings in each CAN. At the housing solutions in each CAN, that's when the different providers get together and they begin to figure out, who should be matched where. Should someone be matched to a rapid rehousing program or a permanent supportive housing program? Rapid rehousing program is one that is shorter. I'm going to go into more detail, but it's shorter. But the goal of that is to rapidly exit, rapidly house as quickly as possible, right? And permanent supportive housing is a little bit more intensive. and it can be long-term. Someone can be in permanent supportive housing forever, really. The goal is always for someone to become self-sufficient, but someone really can be in permanent supportive housing forever, and that's usually for individuals that have a higher need. So that's how the system will work for someone that calls. But of course, not everyone calls 211. Some people don't like calling 211, or some people are, they may be in encampment, they may be in a tent, and they're not ready to contact and ask for help. So that's where an outreach comes in. And outreach is used instead to help to put that person on the by name list and connect them so that they can have some type of housing option. Any questions about any of that? Okay. So I said CAN several times, and I've said our coordinated access network, but this is how it actually works. So our state is broken down into 7 different CANs. You can see by color how the different regions, how it's broken down, and we have 7 different CANs throughout the state. You have the Fairfield CAN, you have Greater New Haven, it's based off. So this is how the CAN system, the Coordinated Access Network, the providers that are within these groups, they have the meetings. This is what their system is called, right? So they get together and they work within their region to coordinate to divert individuals from the shelter, to manage the access to the shelter, to conduct homeless outreach, match homeless individuals to different housing subsidies and vacancies. So these are the different CANs throughout our state. So for our coordinated access, as I said, we have a housing first approach that removes the barriers to help homeless individuals obtain permanent housing as quickly as possible without any unnecessary prerequisites. So it does not matter if someone is actively using. It doesn't matter if someone is not adhering to their mental health. Doesn't matter if they have income or not. Everyone can be housed, right? That's housing first. We'll go into more detail. Another key principle is having coordinated outreach efforts, where we're identifying and engaging individuals, every individual who is experiencing homelessness. And the focus is to have them achieve a housing outcome, being some type of housing outcome. Another key principle is having the by name list that we use to prioritize whoever is the most vulnerable. So those that are the most vulnerable, this is where the assessment comes in. Whoever's the most vulnerable is usually matched first. We've actually recently decided to stop using the VIs for that because it can have its own, setbacks at times, and we just want to open it up and offer as much housing options as possible instead of slowing down the system. So we actually decided to recently stop using the VIs for that, but still have a means to assess, who's vulnerable and what someone's needs truly are. All right, so we're also closely monitoring the progress towards the goal, including how successful a program is with housing individuals. We're aligning the housing and supportive service resources to ensure that everyone can ultimately have a safe, stable place to call home. And it's also really, really important to reduce the barriers as quickly as possible to move someone that's experiencing homelessness. So whatever barriers that may come up, what can we do to remove those barriers? Is a barrier not having enough affordable housing? Is a barrier not having a network of landlords? Is it someone may have a pet, right? And we don't have landlords that's willing to rent for a pet, or they don't have the money to pay for the pet insurance that some landlords require. So what are the barriers and how can we reduce those so that we can house people, right? And then lastly, collaboration and cooperation amongst the state agencies, which is over 200 programs and stakeholders that are committed to ending homelessness, just everyone working together. So, as I said, we're going to talk about housing first. And housing first, if you don't get anything else out of this training, just really understand housing first, because that is where we start. That's where we start, and that is how we can really truly end homelessness with that mindset. Too often you hear from people saying that someone is not ready to be housed. You hear that someone says, you know, they're still using. They don't have a support system. They won't take their medication. They don't have any employment history. You hear all those different things, and you hear people saying that they want someone to achieve these first before they can obtain housing. But housing readiness is not a real thing. People have tried it, but it doesn't work, because when you do that, someone does not have the basic necessities, which is housing. So if someone doesn't have that basic necessity, they're not capable of working on other things, right? So we say that housing first is, it's basically the belief that housing is a basic necessity that must be prioritized before an individual can pursue other personal goals and work towards improving their quality of life. So let's take an individual that is experiencing homelessness. Let's house them first, right? So then they don't have to have that stress over their heads. They have a place to sleep. And then they can focus on their medical, their mental health, their behavioral, their income, landlord relationships. Then they can focus on those areas, right? And then ultimately create a stable life for themselves. So let's focus on housing first. Then we can work on the rest. So when you think about that, housing first is based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you can see from here, the foundation is the physiological needs. So it is someone, it's breathing, having access to food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep. That's the foundation. So obviously when you all are working with someone, everyone's going through their own stuff. People are experiencing homelessness, but they're breathing, right? They have food, or at least you can point them in the right direction to obtain food and water. Hopefully they have some type of clothing on their bodies. If not, there's clothing pantries. You can point them in that direction. But the shelter and the sleep is what's missing. That's really important. So let's house someone, provide them with that shelter. They'll be able to sleep better once they have that. And then they can focus on the other areas, the safety and security, the love and belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization. Then they can focus on those areas once we take care of the foundation. So that's what housing first is based off of. And as you all will be working with people that come from homelessness, just always have that in the back of your mind that we are a housing first state. Right? So that is one of the key components. We're going to go into coordinated outreach. And I just want to look at my time. We're going to go into coordinated outreach. And so coordinated outreach, there's many different roles and functions. And I will say that although there are different jobs, different individuals that perform outreach, there are a lot of different, anyone can do outreach, right? It's not connected to one necessary job or description or title. So anyone can do outreach. And our basic role of outreach is the initial identification. See who is out there. There are individuals that are experiencing homelessness. Not everyone comes. You've seen the workflow. Not everyone comes in our system by calling 211. There's people that are out there that may not even know about 211. There's people that are out there. You see people standing on the corner all the time with signs. Or there's people in encampments, there's people in their car. They may not know how the system works. So with outreach, we want to do the initial identification. Who is out there? Who's experiencing homelessness, and what can we do to help them? And what can we do to bring them in our system? So with that, there's mobile CAN appointments. Now, right now with COVID, everything is mobile. Everything is, someone can just call. They don't have to come in for a face-to-face appointment, whereas that's how it used to be. But with outreach, it's fine. We'll come to you, right? If you don't want to come in, we'll come to you. We'll do the CAN appointment to you, right? Outreach also helps with verification. So for housing prioritization, for seeing how long has someone been homeless, to see and document where they are, which is required for all CANs to have some type of verification. And then also for shelter prioritization, seeing where someone is to see if that they truly are experiencing homelessness. With outreach, you also have crisis and community response. So a lot of outreach teams consist of medical providers, social workers, just having an overall community response. Different providers can be on an outreach team. And we truly encourage to have a broad team. We truly encourage that outreach is just not one person. It is bringing in the community, right? If you know an individual is in a certain area and they don't have a cell phone, they're hard to track, you may want to have a good relationship with the providers of the gas station that they go to. You want to have a good relationship with maybe a family member that they come and visit every Tuesday. So it's having a community response and everyone working together. Outreach is also assertive engagement. Some individuals are not ready to come into the system. Some individuals are not ready or willing to receive any type of help or assistance, but we believe in assertive engagement. We believe in continuing to offer services. If they say one time, I'm okay, leave me alone, I'm okay. That's fine, you're gonna respect them, their wishes, but you might go out there and check every now and then. Do you need anything? Okay, I understand you don't want to go to a shelter, but do you need any socks? Do you need any clothes? Like, what do you need? And you continue to build that relationship with them, and you continue to offer services to them. Outreach is also case management services coordination. Not everyone may need to come right into services, which we hope people actually do not need to, but you can still provide case management and service coordination as being an outreach provider. You can still connect them to a food pantry, a clothing closet, a mental health provider, substance abuse provider. You can still connect them. So outreach is really, really essential and one of our starting points for our system. So coordinated outreach goals and strategies. The goal is to quickly identify and engage anyone experiencing homelessness. Who is out there? Let's quickly identify them. We actually just created an app that individuals can use, our municipalities as well as street providers can use the app so that you can quickly enter it into the database. So not everyone has access to HMIS, but we wanted something so that anyone can use it to document and identify someone that they see that's experiencing homelessness. So we do have a new campaign with our municipalities. It's called My Town Cares, where different towns are really rallying around homelessness and really putting some concrete steps and actions in place to address the homelessness within their city. So that has been great. Other goals and strategies that we have is to always provide assertive, trauma-informed, and equitable services, having the understanding that everyone has some type of trauma. Everyone is experiencing things differently. You want to offer equitable services, meaning that outreach doesn't look the same as everyone. So people may be more likely to go into a encampment to see who is out there to perform outreach versus going into the inner city. So you want to just make sure that it is fair and equitable, and we are providing services for all, right? We also want to promote and monitor progress towards the positive outcomes. If they're making steps in the direction where maybe they're willing to come in or get some assistance, we want to integrate outreach efforts through shared tools, practices, and data. As I said, like the app is one of the shared tools that we recently created. And then lastly, incorporate qualitative and quantitative data for evaluation, sustainability, and replication. So always looking at our data to see, are we, putting a dent in homelessness? Are our numbers going down? How many are going into the shelter? How many unsheltered do we have? So always just looking at our data and seeing how can we improve it. And I think maybe I should pause. I'm going to finish this and then I'm going to look in the chat because I think there's some questions in there. Right. Lastly, with outreach, it's really important to have to establish some partnerships. Yes, it's vital. Our CAN partners are vital, but that's only the surface. You should have as many people involved as possible in outreach. So it's different people coming together. So outreach can utilize DOT, parking enforcement, police, business owners. Maybe for DOT, if they realize that, okay, we see this car here all the time and it has a lot of stuff in it, you can kind of tell if someone's staying in their car, right? So maybe as they're doing their patrol, you can say, okay, if you see this person, can you provide them with my card so that, I can offer some type of assistance for them. For police officers, a lot of time police officers know where someone that's experiencing homelessness is. Business owners can be a great help because a lot of individuals may be outside of their businesses, and they can help to say, okay, I know he's here between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Come at that time. Youth service bureaus are great. You can utilize McKinney-Ventles, which is the providers within the school system, as well as clinicians, teachers, housing navigators can utilize shelter staff, healthcare providers, and then schools, again, can utilize McKinney-Ventles, guidance counselors, outreach, social service agents, whoever an individual may be involved with that you can use to help you with providing services or just support to someone that's experiencing homelessness. Okay, before I go to my next topic, I'm going to look into the chat and see if there's any questions. Okay. All right. Okay, so is Couchsurfing eligible for Housing First programs? So Couchsurfing, they will not fit the criteria for a permanent supportive housing program because someone has to be imminent. They have to be literally homeless. However, Couchsurfing, they can be considered imminent homeless. So maybe they will not be in a PSH program, but they may be a fit for rapid housing. Or they can also receive assistance through diversion funds or rapid exit funds. Maybe that person that is couchsurfing is only couchsurfing because they don't have first month's rent. Or maybe they're couchsurfing because they have a utility bill, that is very, very high. And once they pay that bill off, then they're able to obtain housing. So you can still support them and help them without, them really being a part of a program. They may not need that. They just may need some diversion funds to assist them with getting their own housing. Okay, so how can someone rent an apartment without a job or a security deposit? Well, that is where our supportive housing programs come in that have the subsidy. So with rapid housing as well as with permanent supportive housing, they have the subsidy. They have the subsidy, which is the financial assistance to put them in an apartment to house someone. So if someone is going into rapid rehousing, right off the bat, they will take care of the rent, but the goal is to get that person employed. So let's house them first. The program will take care of the rent, and then we're going to work with them to get them employed so that they can get to the point where they're able to take over that rent on their own. But yes, they can absolutely still be housed. All right, it looks like that's close. We're going to go into the next section. All right, shelter diversion. This is when we start getting into the good stuff, as you all are looking in. So shelter diversion, it is the strategy that prevents homelessness at the front door of the shelter. Now, we say that we really don't want anyone to come into the system, right? We want to divert people from the system as much as possible. So this is where shelter diversion comes in. So the goal of shelter diversion is to help people identify immediate alternative housing arrangements, connect them with services, financial assistance to help them secure and maintain their permanent housing, and develop long-term housing goals. That's our goal of shelter diversion. So at every point, we try to divert people from coming into the system. At every point, we try to divert them. So shelter diversion is a housing solution, and shelter diversion is not solely done by anyone that has only one job description, right? Schools, child welfare, the criminal justice system, social services, early childhood providers, hospitals, all can work and do shelter diversion to assist with having a housing solution. You do not have to work within the housing, the homeless response system. You don't even have to have provide case management services. If you know that someone is experiencing some type of housing crisis, you can still do shelter diversion to assist them with doing so. We actually do shelter diversion trainings for a lot of these different groups, for hospitals, for schools, so that they have the tools and they understand how the system works so that they can practice shelter diversion. So I'm going to tell you what shelter diversion is, but first let's talk about the reasons to implement shelter diversion. Let me get this off my screen. So there's several different reasons to implement shelter diversion, obviously, but one of a really important one is also it improves our system outcomes by reducing entries into homelessness. Of course, we don't want people coming back into our system. We don't want people coming into the homeless system at all. So with diversion, you're diverting, so they're not coming into the system at all. It also improves the quality of life by helping people avoid the stress of shelter stays. Being in the shelter is stressful. You don't have your own space. You don't have privacy, right? You don't know who's next to you. There are different shelter hours. There's certain times where someone has to be outside of the shelter. So being in the shelter is not something that anyone wants to be in, obviously. And we want to keep people away from that as much as possible. Being in the shelter can also re-traumatize people, right? If they have some type of trauma and then they're around people that they don't know or feel safe around, that can re-traumatize them. Shelter diversion also conserves and targets resources so that the shelter beds are only used when absolutely necessary. If someone has another housing option, then there's somewhere else for them to go, instead of having another option but choosing not to use it. And then we're using up the beds, and we don't have beds available for those that truly need the shelter beds with no other option. Also, shelter diversion cuts down on shelter wait lists. We do have shelter wait lists, which is something that we are working on not having, because having a shelter wait list is not really a housing option. A housing outcome. There's no outcome. You're just put on a wait list. So that's something that we're working on. But we want to cut down on shelter wait lists. If someone is diverted, they will never be put on the wait list. Shelter diversion is also cost effective. So diversion assistance can be simply having a phone call to work with someone, doing some type of mediation between a family member. Maybe a family member kicked them out and they just need some assistance with talking to that family member to come up with some type of plan so that they can come back home and have a place to live, right? It may also be giving them a small amount of food with mediation that goes along with that. It may be Greyhound bus tickets. So maybe someone has a family member in another state that they know that they can stay with. So, we can provide diversion funds so that they can have that, get those bus tickets and go stay with that family. Also, as I said, another example, if they need a utility bill paid so that they can pay and get their own apartment or pay for some back rent that they owe, then we can use that as a means of diversion so that someone doesn't have to go into a shelter. Instead, we're going to pay these fees off for you and you can get your own apartment. And then also it's first month rent and deposit, which can be a lot when you have to pay all of that money up front. Maybe they don't have those funds up front. They have income, but they don't have those funds up front. So we can pay for those funds and then they'll be able to pay for the rest of their rent on their own. So having diversion is less expensive than wrap-away housing. It's less expensive than a shelter stay, and it's less expensive than street homelessness, right? Because you're diverting someone, you are working with them on solving that problem. So shelter diversion is a conversation. As an individual, as a provider, you all can do diversion in the work that you do. And just keep in mind that it's a conversation. You're listening to them, you're hearing what they're saying, what their housing crisis is, what their problem is. You're assisting them with identifying natural supports and resources. You're identifying and highlighting their strengths as they're telling their story. Maybe they were housed before. Maybe they have a strong support system. That's a strength. Maybe they know how to use the 2-1 system, or they know how to find the resources that they need. Those are strengths. So it's important to highlight their strengths. Also, provide as much information as possible to help them with their housing crisis. Do some myth busting and reality testing to see if there's any other options. Maybe they're saying they don't have any options, but you're hearing from their story that it sounds like you may be able to mediate something with the family member, right? So you just want to do some good listening for them. And the person that's in a housing crisis, as you're having this divergent conversation, they're sharing their story, they're developing their own housing plan, saying what it is that they want for themselves. They're asking questions. They're taking steps with guidance as needed to secure and maintain permanent housing. So you all are having this conversation and working together to try to come up with some type of resolve. So when you're having this conversation, you're going to ask, can you tell me about why you are seeking emergency shelter today? Or in your situations, it may be why do you have any other housing options? What are all of the other things you tried or thought about before you sought shelter? How long have you been staying there? You're going to find out what is their primary or their main reason that they have to leave the place where they stayed last night. Are there any additional reasons why they can't stay there any longer? Where did they stay before that? Listening and figuring out their story. Do you think that they'll be able to stay with a family member? What resources do you have right now that can help you and your family find a place to stay or temporarily find a place for housing? So as you are working with individuals that are experiencing homelessness, have these conversations with them and see, is there any type of problem? Obviously if there's a problem, but is there any type of resolution? Is there anything that you all can do to assist them to end their homelessness as quickly as possible. So after you have listened to them, you explore their past strengths, what their housing options are, then you're going to see if they have a family that they can go to. Can they return to their own residence? Can they be diverted and seek new housing, or can they relocate out of town? And what other needs has the client identified as you're having these conversations with them? So CCEH, we have a couple of different streams of emergency assistance. So we have assistance for our YHDP program, which is our Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, and that is rapid exit and shelter diversion funds for individuals that are 18 to 24 years old. We also have funds for shelter diversion, which is any type of funds to keep an individual and family from experiencing episodes of homelessness and entering the shelter. And then we have rapid exit funds, and it's funds to keep episodes of homelessness as rare and brief as possible for families and individuals. So these funds can be used, I'm going to go into what these funds can be used for. Sorry. These funds can be used in many different areas, but okay. But what's needed is that the agency must have a signed MOU with CCEH. The staff has to complete the request, and they also have to have attended a CCEH diversion training. And then the individual also has to have access to HMIS database and client records if they are requesting funds for diversion. But the funds can be used in many different ways, as we believe diversion is really, really important. I don't know if you all will have access to HMIS, but we are having more and more access. I'm sure, I think some of your organizations that I see actually does have access to HMIS, and we do have an MOU with you all. But diversion funds can be used for security deposit, partial rent subsidy, rental arrears, utility deposit, utility arrears, rental application fees, moving expenses, pet expenses, which is something new. We actually just started a grant with PetSmart because we see that having a pet can be a barrier. There's a lot of landlords that are requiring a pet deposit, or you have individuals that are homeless and are not willing to go into a shelter because they don't want to leave their pet. But if you utilize pet expenses, maybe they can go into a shelter temporarily instead of in their car when it's really, really cold, and they can use the funds to board their animal so that they can feel safe about putting their pet in a boarding facility while they take care of themselves. We also can use expenses for transportation, bus passes, or going to stay with another family member, past due medical bills, childcare costs, and any other cost that is associated with achieving shelter diversion, as long as it's included on an individual's housing stabilization plan. All right, so the main thing is just thinking outside of the box. If there's some type of barrier where financial assistance can assist with the individual no longer being homeless, then, let's figure it out, because sometimes it's just the means of paying something off or providing some additional financial assistance. Any questions before I go to the next section?
We did have one question in the chat box.
Okay.
And a comment as well.
All right. Okay. It appears that we are trying to solve a problem with the same. We are working on a systems level. So we do understand that there are structural and systemic racism amongst our system. And actually, that is something else that CCEH is working towards, working on race equity, and changing our system and being aware that there are some biases within our system. There are some inequities within our system, and working on our system as a whole. That is something that we're definitely working on. But this has the racial inequities and how our system has been around forever. It is going to take a lot of time to completely change our entire system along those lines, but it starts with acknowledgement and having a plan and figuring out what we need to do within our system to make some change. And we're moving in that direction. I can say that for Connecticut. Okay, good. Okay. How do the folks who found this gutter get the help they need? Got it. Okay. That question is actually going to be answered during our next section, where I'm going to go into rapid rehousing. So let me see if I answer that for you. Okay. All right. So supportive housing. So for supportive housing, there's many forms of supportive housing actually, but I'm going to go into permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing is for individuals that have a disability. So usually the disability can be a mental health disability or substance abuse disability. And then there's also other disabilities, but usually it's one of those two. So it can be the individual, the adult that has a disability, or it can also be the child that has the disability. But for PSH, the individual has to have a disability to obtain permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing, there is no end date to having assistance. Someone, as I said, can have assistance forever if necessary. And they also receive supported services. So they also receive case management services. Of course, the goal is for all individuals to become self-sufficient, but overall, we just want for individuals to have housing stability. So that's permanent supportive housing, right? And then we also have rapid rehousing. And rapid rehousing serves as the approach to end homelessness as quickly as possible for families and individuals. So think about rapid rehousing as kind of like a trampoline, right? Where you're using the targeted financial assistance and short-term services to quickly return an individual back to housing that slipped into homelessness. So maybe it was something that maybe they were incarcerated, or maybe they just fell on some really, really tough times, right? And they fell on some really, really tough times and they entered homelessness. And they just need a little bit of assistance so that they can get back on their feet. That's what rapid rehousing is, giving them just enough assistance so that they can get back on their feet. So you have the subsidy, the financial assistance, you have the case management, and that equals rapid rehousing. Now we say for rapid rehousing, we're looking at maybe 6 months or so, right? 6 months or so, but oftentimes it lasts longer. But the goal is to house someone, provide them with the case management, work with them on obtaining employment, and so that within those 6+ months, if longer, they're able to take over the rental payments on their own. So what do you all think? Is rapid rehousing for everyone? Why should we try rapid rehousing?
Are we able to speak?
Yes.
Okay, so I think rapid rehousing works for some people who just need a push or for those who are almost self-sufficient, and they just need a boost out their housing. It doesn't necessarily work for people who have multiple issues. If they're disabled, they have mental health use or here are.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. We can't hear. I'm sure
Can you hear me?
No, we weren't able to hear any of that.
Okay.
Maybe can you put it in the chat?
I'm not sure what's going on.
Hey, Sylvia, it sounds like there's an issue with your microphone, so it's sounding very fuzzy. If you're able to put that comment in the chat instead, I think that'll be the best way for us to understand your comment.
Yeah, my screen's haywire. So I with my.
Okay, so if you can put that in the chat, that will be great. So is rapid rehousing for everyone? We say rapid rehousing can be for everyone because we don't know if someone's going to be successful or not, right? So people surprise you all the time. Maybe they just need that, they need that chance, they need that opportunity, they need that comfort for a little while, and then they're able to get back on their feet. So you don't know who's going to be successful in rapid rehousing and who's not going to be successful. So there's no assessment for client resiliency. We don't know how someone's going to be able to bounce back, but we want to provide them with the opportunity to do so. And then it's not a one-size-fits-all program. There's flexibility. Someone can be housed. We provide them with services and supports in different areas, whatever their areas of needs are. So some people have been very, very successful in rapid rehousing, some not so much, but we start people in rapid rehousing, and if they need more assistance, then they can go into another housing program where maybe they don't have to, there's not such a emphasis on taking over the rent, where maybe they're able to have that security of knowing that they have the program backing to support them with the rent for as long as they need to get themselves together. So that's just a little overview. As I said, I'm just going to touch on everything briefly because I'm only going over the fundamentals, but that's the basis of the programs. And with the different programs, someone gets that housing subsidy, they get the security of having housing, but they also get case management and services, right? So for case management and services, our goals is to always focus on solving the housing crisis. Whatever housing crisis that they have, figure out what can we do to assist with that. It's also supporting and helping them on a path for housing stabilization. We don't just want to house someone temporarily. The goal is to house someone and keep them housed. So bring in whatever resources that they need, whatever supports that they need. I see in our chat, there's people saying that there's a stronger need. Yes, we believe in supporting people, whatever their needs are, figuring out how can we help them. Also help them resolve their issues that impede access to housing. If they have a criminal record, if there's employment, what is causing them to not have access to housing. Also connecting the client to community resources and services and self-sufficiency. We also focus on daily living skills. We don't want to just house someone, we want to keep someone housed. So if they need assistance with managing their money or being a good tenant, working with the landlord, working on communication skills, anger management, taking care of your mental health, whatever it may be, the goal is to get the individual to the point where they can become self-sufficient. So some common barriers to housing that we see is having low income, having a lack of family or friends, substance abuse, criminal record, mental illness, foreclosures, past evictions, pet owners, all of that. There's tons of common barriers to housing. However, as I said previously, we believe in housing first. So we believe in doing whatever is necessary to house an individual first and then working on these other issues. You know, we can house someone and then work on their employment, house them, and work on helping them to build their support system. If there's any foreclosures, past evictions, one big thing that we do with housing individuals is having a support of landlords that is, supports the program, is willing to work with us and not pay attention to if someone may have a record, if someone was evicted previously, but really is willing to work with us to house people. If someone's a pet owner, I spoke about that. So whatever barriers that there may be, we want to work around them, right? So when we're providing case management services, and this is something that you all can have in mind as you're providing services to people, some common principles that we have is that our services are always client-driven, they're strengths-based, they're trauma-informed, and they're housing-focused. So with client-driven, we mean that the client directs when, where, how often case management meetings are. They are in charge of their housing stabilization plan and the services that they receive. It comes from them. It is in their words, it comes from them. Of course, we are supporting, of course, we are assisting, but it comes from them. It is their plan. Of course, if you tell someone, well, you should do this or you should work on that, they're not going to want to do it. It has to come from them so that they're willing to work on it. It's all about what it is that they want for themselves. So we're client driven. We allow their families to have space to test and problem solve, especially with landlords. We are available to assist with landlords and mediate any issues that is necessary. And then any challenges that arise, become teachable moments for being a good tenant. And we prepare clients to be a good tenant. Now, some may not have been housed in so many years. They may think anyone needs to learn how to be a good tenant or a good neighbor. Don't have your music blasting at 11 o'clock at night. People are trying to sleep. So just those kind of things. Make sure you pay your rent on time. Different things so that there's no issues that may come up with a landlord and then they may be at risk of being evicted. So services are always strength-based. We help them identify their own strengths and success in their past that can help them with their current crisis. So maybe they was really good at paying the rent before, or being employed before, or having a strong support system before. Whatever strengths they really had before to be successful, let's think about how we can bring that in now so that you can continue to do so. So support and trust that individual wants to succeed. Always going to support that they want to be successful and speak that into them. Always be positive and encourage them. So being trauma informed is basically emphasizing the emotional and physical safety, just knowing that people are going to have their own traumas and realizing how someone's trauma can affect them and being sensitive to that. So if doing so, you want to establish trust, you want to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment for them. You want to minimize the chance of re-traumatizing them. Now, our system within itself can be traumatizing. We realize that when someone has to call 211, when someone has to tell their story over and over, that can be re-traumatizing. If someone has to go from provider to provider, that can be re-traumatizing. So we want to minimize the chances of re-traumatizing and realizing what someone could possibly have been through. You want to limit their exposure to future trauma. Someone may have a past where they, was abused sexually by men. So you don't want that person to work with a man. They may respond differently to a man. You don't want to re-traumatize them in that way. So just being sensitive and listening to someone and taking into consideration that may have an impact on them and affect them. All right. We are always housing focused, where we are always focusing on housing stabilization. We are client owners, their plan. The plan needs to work for them. It doesn't need to work for us. It is their plan. It is what they want to do to get housed as well as stay housed, right? And then by starting with what previously worked for them, we can increase the odds of it working again. Also, we want to utilize other community and state resources, link them to as many services as necessary early to help them have that support in getting the services that they need or resources, right? So we're always housing retention focused. As I said, our goal within the system is not just to house people. Yes, we want to end homelessness. We have ended homelessness in Connecticut. Our numbers are going down, but we also want people to stay housed. And we focus on doing that, housing retention. So our housing plans that every individual has, our goals are focused on compliance with their lease so that they can stay housed, and how the client is going to pay the rent to maintain their housing on their own after the program, as well as having housing plan goals that are smart and specific. Which means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. We believe in short-term goals, celebrating what can be accomplished soon, focused on what's right in front of you instead of the long picture. Sometimes it can be too much to have such a big goal, right? It can be overwhelming for some. So let's focus on short-term goals. Also, plans can be updated regularly. And then services intensity can increase or decrease if necessary. It's all based on what someone needs. Also, as I was speaking about being trauma-informed, you also have to realize that people go through conflict and crisis, and it has an impact on them. So conflict and crisis can impede the ability to be hopeful and confident. So you may work with the individual and you're thinking, why? I'm trying to offer some services and supports, why are they not hopeful at all? Because they have some type of conflict and crisis that they have experienced before. So that makes it difficult. So they may also have a hard time clarifying their goals, saying what it is that they want for themselves. They're not able to think about that yet. They may have a hard time advocating for themselves or taking back control. They're so used to a system that has taken them in so many different directions. They don't feel comfortable with taking back any type of control for themselves. Or they may have a difficult time having positive interactions with people. So as you're working with people, they may not be willing to work with you initially, or have any type of positive interactions with them. And that may be because they have past trauma or they have past conflict and crisis. But we still just want to empower individuals. We want to still work with them. We want them to make them feel stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. You want to empower them to make their own decisions, work alongside them as a partner, be there to support them during this journey, and then shift the conversation from what can we do to help you to what is your plan to become and remain housed? What's your plan for yourself? So a lot of times when we're working with someone, we use motivational interviewing, which I think is a great tool. We often do motivational interviewing trainings. I actually have one coming up on the 14th. It's a full workshop, but motivational interviewing is a great practice that is used to really work with someone and really communicate with them. It's a person-centered technique that strengthens the individual's own motivation and commitment to change. So it's not you as a provider saying you should do this to change, but it is them saying for themselves what it is that they want for themselves, right? What kind of life is it that they want to have for themselves? What drives them? What motivates them? What do they want their situation to be like? and helping them map that out to take those steps to make that change, right? So there's some key skills with motivational interviewing. You have open-ended questions where you're not asking a lot of yes and no questions, right? You're not asking you don't want to get a one-word answer. You want to ask questions where they're able to speak and you're able to really listen to them to see what are they truly saying. Motivational interviewing, there's a lot of affirmation. You're giving them positive affirmations. You're supporting them. There's a lot of reflections. You're rephrasing what it is that they're saying and so they can hear themselves. Also summarizing. So you may have a session with someone and then at the end, you just want to summarize to say, okay, so we talked about this. This is what we're going to do. This is what you're saying that you want to do. Or it sounds like this is how you're feeling about this situation. Is that true? So they can hear for themselves what it is that they're saying. Also, another key skill is having change talk, right? You want to ask questions about the desired change for themselves. What are some questions to get that change? When you ask these questions, it may be things that they never even thought about before, but asking those questions so that they can think about for themselves what kind of change it is that they see for themselves. What do they want for themselves? And then that can help you as a provider kind of work with them to take those steps. So as we provide case management, we also believe in linkage to as many services and community resources as possible. We also want to focus on the client building their support network outside of the program. Yes, we're providing services, but you don't want to be their only means for everything. You want them to know where to go, right? If they're experiencing some type of crisis. Where do I go for food? Where do I go for employment? Who can help me with my resume? Where can I go for mental health? Where do I go if I'm back on my utilities? Just what can I do? As well as social support, right? Where can I go or how to build relationships with people again. Some may be isolated for so long and they need that assistance with kind of building those friendships and relationships with others, or connecting them, assisting them with getting connection back with their family members that they haven't been connected to in years. So assisting them with that, as well as knowing how to independently problem solve. And as I said, be able to access resources, and then connecting them to mainstream and community-based services. So that's your mental health providers, that's your medical providers, substance abuse providers. Those are your mainstream services. And some examples is employment, food assistance, churches, volunteer opportunities, social security, transportation, just anything, any type of support or resources that individual would need. And then, of course, if you are not able to come up with any, or if someone just doesn't know where to start, you can always call 211. 211, we often think of 211 as being only for housing, but 211 has so many different programs and services and resources right there. They can call 211 or go to the website and say what their need is, and they can support them with some type of resolution. So as I said, I just wanted to quickly go over some of our basic principles, some of the fundamentals of our Connecticut homeless response system. All of this information can be found on our website if you want to discuss any further or learn more about any of these topics that I briefly covered. But now I'm going to open it up, and I do see that we have some questions that are in the chat. So let me see if I can get through them. The question is, what do you do if someone says they want to call, they call 211 for assistance, such as moving expenses, but they're told there's no funding? Some individuals feel discouraged and are hesitant to reach out to 211 for assistance. That is true. You have a lot of individuals that do not want to contact 211. I will say, as a provider, you can do it in different ways. Sometimes I have been on a call because 211, someone has to call themselves. Sometimes I've joined them in that call to assist them. They called, but I'm going to be there to support, to help, to have the conversation, to explore other options, or also look outside of the box and see what other programs or services are out there to see what can be done. Now, something as far as moving expenses, that may be something that CCH can assist with as far as diversion funds. So looking at other providers such as that to see how we can help. So do you refer them to employment services and job search support or paid training? Absolutely. Absolutely. We always want, especially for rapid rehousing, where it's kind of more of a short term, and the goal is so that someone can get to the point where they're able to take over the rent on their own. You can assist with helping to create their resume yourself if you're skilled in that area. If not, yes, different employment services that will do it for them, different job search, interviewing, helping them create different profiles on Indeed or get connected in that way. But absolutely, you want to connect as much services as possible. Yes, someone said help them find their voice to make positive actions in their lives so that they become their own advocate. Absolutely, because there's not always going to be a program behind them. And we have to be very careful as being service providers. We want to always make sure that we're providing a service, but we want to make sure that we're also not getting to a point where we are enabling someone, or some providers feel as though, they have me, they don't need anyone else. No, you want to teach them how to be their own advocate. They can make that phone call on their own. They can problem solve on their own. Teach them to have those skills. So it said patience is the key. 211 is stressful. The waiting time, absolutely. And we know, as I'm talking about this presentation, I'm going through our homeless response system. We know that everything is not perfect by any means. It's not perfect, but our goal is to end homelessness. We have been doing so. We have a lot of kinks that we need to work out. There's still a lot of issues. There's still a lot of systems level issues. There's still a lot of problems that we need to solve. We are aware. So we're trying as they come about, but we do know that a lot of people don't feel comfortable calling 211. And as a provider, help them, support them as much as you can. If it's necessary for you to be on that phone call with them, then do so. If you have to, call someone else and try to get some information or find another resource yourself, then do so. Whatever you can do to support your client.